Nader Hashemi joins us now. He's the director of the Center of Middle East Studies and also an associate professor at Joseph Korbel School of International Studies at the University of Denver. Great to have you on the program. Very quickly, your response there, reaction to what Joe Biden said, breaking his silence and repeating that mantra that we've heard before, that Israel has the right to defend itself.
Well, I think it just underscores the complicity of Joe Biden in the violence and the atrocities that we're seeing in Gaza right now. Effectively, what Joe Biden is saying is that Israel can do whatever it wants. The United States will continue to support Israel unconditionally. And I'd also want to highlight what's happening at the United Nations, which just underscores the point that I'm trying to make. For the last 48 hours, there's been an attempt to issue a statement condemning the violence and calling for a ceasefire. The United States is blocking the issuing of a statement that calls for a ceasefire because that's what Israel wants. So what we're seeing here is more of the same, more unconditional support from the United States for Israel that just implicates, what is happening today in the Gaza Strip.
Why can't this change? And it really seems remarkable that the US is blocking the UN Security Council from issuing that statement calling for a ceasefire. Why?
Well, for a very long time, the United States effectively acts as a lawyer for Israel. It likes to claim that it's an honest broker, but the United States, for decades upon decades, has coddled Israel, supported Israel militarily, financially, has blocked any criticism of Israel at the United Nations, and so the crisis that we're seeing right now is very much the culmination and the result of these types of policies. These types of policies by the United States, the one-sided policies, the effective dehumanization of the Palestinians, have brought us to this moment of crisis. And of course, this is a view that is widespread among the American foreign policy establishment, among the leadership of the two main political parties in the United States, but at the level of public opinion in the United States, there's a very different, I think, view of what's happening. I think there's a much greater sense of outrage, a deep desire for a shift in U.S. policy to be more balanced and to be more supportive of the legitimate rights of the Palestinians.
And Nada, on that point, we've been hearing comments from members of Congress. What impact could that have?
Well, because they're members of Congress, they do have a voice, and their statements criticizing U.S. policy, criticizing what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing to the Palestinians, they do get a hearing. And I think they are much more representative of where public opinion is in the United States today, particularly among young people, particularly among growing sections of the American Jewish community who are very upset and outraged at what Netanyahu is doing in their name. So I think, it's also a small sign of optimism, despite the violence and the tragedy that we're seeing. It suggests that, the monopoly on the debate here in the United States that right-wing supporters of Israel have enjoyed for a very long time, that's starting to wither away. And you can see it among these progressive members of Congress like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York, Bernie Sanders, et cetera.
And that monopoly on the debate and Israel's narrative, how is social media and these images that we've seen coming, Palestinians being attacked, how can that impact the narrative?
Well, I think social media, helps, challenge, what we just heard from Joe Biden, that, Israel has the right to defend itself. Well, of course, Israel has the right to defend itself, but what about the Palestinians? Do they have the right to defend themselves? Do they have the right to sort of live in peace and security and to enjoy national rights, human rights, as the Israelis do? Of course, Joe Biden and his foreign policy team don't want to talk about that, but at least on social media, there is a greater, I think, diversity of thought and exposure to an alternative narrative that I think is much more balanced. And I think that's helping shift the public debate here in the United States. Of course, that hasn't filtered upwards in terms of shifting U.S. foreign policy yet, but I suspect it will sometime down the road.
Optimistic point to end on. Thank you very much indeed, Nader Hashemi. Great to have you on the programme.